Today, we're going to be focusing on frame board profitability, a step by step guide to better frame board management. Our focus today is going to be mapping your frame brands. And the things that we're going to be covering are, understanding that it's really important that we take the emotion out of buying our frames. I would love for you to think differently about your frame boards. Um, it's really important that our frames are turning and they're being profitable. So I want you to think of your frame boards as a piece of real estate. And if they're not turning and being profitable, then we have to work with our frame companions in a way that is going to bring in new product that will help us meet our business goals. And then lastly, we're going to teach you how to map out your dispensary so that you know exactly how many units your practice can display and the number of collections that you should be showcasing within your optical dispensary. As consumers, right, myself included, I buy things these days because when I need them, but I do buy things that are emotional to me. I think about my iPhone 11, and I love this phone; it's great. But I also know that there is a new generation out, the iPhone 12, and while my phone is only 4 months old, I think about the new features of that 12, and it's got a better camera, and it's got all these great things that my 11 doesn't have. And, it becomes an emotional purchase. And frame buying is really no different. If we think about the people that buy our frames, right? It's um, a frame rep comes in, they bring in their bags, they've got all these beautiful styles and colors, and we pick them up and we try them on and we ooh and goo over them, no different than my iPhone 11 or 12. And so, our frames are the single most important investment that we're going to make within our optical dispensary. And so we have to choose these frames wisely. And it starts with really two things. What are your needs and who are your patients? And when I think about your patients, yes, gender and age and socioeconomic status are all equally important. But who are they as people? What hobbies or interests are they involved in? And are we making the right frame choices in what we're purchasing? And is it going to benefit and meet the needs of those patients? Um, we're going to, throughout the series, um, take a look at your needs and, starting off with an analysis of your current frames. We can't uncover those needs unless we understand, where you're coming from. So we're going to take a look at your price points. Do you have a healthy mix of all the different price points that are out there? Do you know how your managed care plans are performing? And what are the selling habits of your team? Um, and more importantly, when it comes to selling habits, I'm thinking about discounts. Are there too many discounts that are being offered to the patients? So let's start with your frame boards. Let's start with every single one of us either owns a home or we rent an apartment or we have a condo, whether we own or rent, right? And, as people who live in homes or condos or apartments, we all have to do our part and we have to pay rent or mortgage. And if we don't, then we are at risk of being evicted from our homes. Well, frames are really no different. That frame board is a piece of real estate. There's a lot of money tied into that board. And, if we think about it, every single peg on that frame board is a unit, and it's a unit within a bigger picture, which is the condo. And just like us as people, we have to pay our rent, and so do your frames. They have to turn and they have to be profitable. And if they're not, we do have to unfortunately evict them. But it becomes challenging because we have developed an emotional connection with our reps and we just love them and we just can't get rid of them because the rep is so nice. But it's difficult to make business decisions off of nice. So, you know, yes, it's important that we develop that relationship with them. And um, we're going to talk about some ways in which we can grow an invested relationship with our rep. And it works both ways. But my first key point to you is keep those free frames to a minimum. The last thing that we want to do is to have 20, 30 free frames that have been provided to our teams. And now we learn like, this brand just isn't selling and we have got to let it go. It is costing us money over and over. And that can be difficult to do when we have an emotional connection with our frame reps. So keep those frames to a minimum. If you have to make that decision, you don't want that to come back at you and say, well, I gave you 20 free frames and you need to keep me on your boards for X amount of times. You just don't want to be in that kind of relationship. So, your frames, as we said, are the single most important investment that you're going to make. And so, we really need to learn about the optical, its layout more specifically. Um, Thinking about our frame boards, how many do you have? How many columns are on each board, and how many frames can be displayed on each column? Do you have shelves? How many frames can be displayed beautifully without being an overload of frames? And then, how many freestanding branded displays do you have? So, like, do you have Ray-Ban displays or Nike displays or Oakley or Kate Spade or Silhouette, any of those, right? We include that within our optical. So let's take a look at what this is going to look like. This is a very small optical. You can see that we've got 4 boards, we've got 2 shelves, and we've got 3 different displays. So let's map this out. Boards 1 and 2 each have 6 columns, and each column can hold 14 units. That's 84 units for for each one of those boards. Units 3 and 4 are a little bit smaller. We've got 5 columns, and each column holds 12 units. So units 3 and 4 can hold 60 units apiece. Our boards alone hold 288 units. Remember, we have shelves. We've got 2 of those, and on your shelves you can display probably about 14 to 18 units. Anything more than that, it starts to look a little bit cluttered. So those 2 shelves hold 28 units. And then we've got 3 freestanding displays. We've got Ray-Ban, which holds 45 units, Silhouette nicely at 28, and we have Kate Spade that can hold 36 units. Those displays can hold 109 units total. So between our boards, our shelves, and our displays, we have 428 units that can be displayed on our boards. That's a nice number. As a consultant, I have been in many, many practices where I've seen just an overload of the number of brands that they have in-house. I think the most that I ever saw was 75 different brands. And it doesn't mean that we showcase 75 brands beautifully. It means that we had 75 different brands, and we might have had 1 or 2 pieces in each brand, or we might have had, 6 or 8, but we never really had a collection. We've been ingrained to think that more collections are better, but I'm here to tell you that's not always better. And here's why. When you only hold 1 or 2 pieces, or maybe 6 or 8, it doesn't showcase the brand very well. And so what happens is that patients come in and they're like, oh, do you have this in a different color or a different size? And so now our costs are increasing because we're having to order frames for our patients to view. If our patients don't like them, what happened to the frames? They typically go back on the board, and then they sit because nobody wants them. Also, what happens is that it can have a negative impact on your discounts. So typically, when we go deeper in collections, our reps have the capability of being able to provide additional discounts, maybe a little bit more over what they could normally do. But if you're only showcasing 1 to 8 pieces, you may not be able to take advantage of those additional discounts. And then the also thing that I've always seen is that our reps may not be invested in us. Why would they? They've only got 1 or 2 pieces, or maybe 8 or 10 pieces. It's not worth their time to come in. But if we find those very key specific brands that, meet the needs of our patients, that has a nice healthy price point mix of different styles and different brands, then our reps are going to become invested in us. And when they become invested in us, that means they're going to be more apt to helping us find a frame that's been discontinued, or tracking a frame down that's on back order with another one of their clients. They'll come around more often and service your boards. So if we invest in them, they will invest in us. So more collections, fewer pieces within those collections is not always better. But instead, if we think the opposite and we have fewer collections, but we go deeper in each one of those collections, it's going to create more value. It's going to deliver higher returns. So again, doing turn rates for practices, and I see, where they only have allocation amounts of 6 or 8 units and they've only sold 6 frames. Okay, that makes sense. You don't have anything to show them. So it's bypassed. So you'll have higher returns on, those collections that you bring in. At the same time, it's also going to reduce our costs. So there's less likely of a chance of saying, hey, can, you bring in or order, 5 different frames. It's going to reduce those costs. So you're not buying frames and having to put them out on the floor, or else you're returning them back to your rep. And then it's going to increase your buying power. As I said, just the opposite of, more collections, but fewer units. You lose out on discounts. But when you go deeper in those collections, you increase your buying power by getting additional discounts. So let's take a look at how many collections that we can physically house in our optical dispensary that showcased 400 and some units. So if we take units 1 and 2, so boards 1 and 2, we know that we have 84 units. So if we just said, okay, what if I divide this board into 3s? What could I do? Well, I can showcase 28 units of 3 collections. So instead of having 6 collections, I've reduced that down to 3, but I've gone deeper into those. So now I have 28 units that I can showcase in each one of those collections. In unit 3, if we take that board and we divide it in half, you could do 2 collections of 30. Or you could do a collection of 28 and then a collection of 32. So, here in this particular instance, whether, and this is not counting my shelves and my freestanding displays, but just my boards alone, I can showcase 10 collections. That's a lot of brands that you're bringing in. That's a beautiful choice. So you factor in your shelves, that's 2 more collections. And then you factor in your freestanding displays, that's 3 more. So now we are showcasing 15 total collections within our dispensary. That's a great number. So now what I'd love for you to do is to do the same thing that we've done here. Map out your optical. Let's see if we can streamline how many brands you currently have. And let's see if we can streamline that down to a more manageable number. And then next week, we're going to continue our framework profitability. Session 2 is going to be all about selecting your brands. Thanks for joining in, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.